Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. So Booker season is coming up. Actually, I would say that it's already started because there are a group of us, there are several people who put out Booker predictions videos. I am one of those people. I get a lot of pleasure being a part of the conversation, the book prize conversation, including the Booker, because it's just the definition of fun as I fix my top. So there there's always new concepts and new video ideas, new conversations popping up here, there, and everywhere on booktube. And recently Charlotte Malloy, who is a wonderful booktuber here in the community, I will leave her link down below, did basically her favorite Booker books, whether they be long listed, or short listed, or one. She pulled 12 or 13. I don't know actually, because the Booker dozen is what they call it, because sometimes the long list is 12 books and sometimes the long list is 13 books. But anyway, she made a list of either 12 or 13 of her favorite books that have either been long listed, short listed, or won the Booker. And of course, Scott, my friendly nemesis here on BookTube, at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, decided to follow up with, decided to weaponize her video into a tag. Who do you think you are, Scott? Steve Donahue? No. But actually I was watching Scott's video and I was like, that's such a great idea. I feel immediately inspired. And so now I have my Booker's, actually, it's not a Booker's dozen. It's like it's a baker's dozen. It's not a baker's dozen. It's a true dozen. It's only 12 books. And we'll get into that when I get into the meat of the video. If you are new here, then hi, I'm Shelly, and I love book prizes. I love being a part of the conversation about what is getting attention in the bookish world these days, and in our current day. And it's really fun to take something like the Booker and pull my favorites from it. So if you like this kind of video, I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around, and without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. If you can't tell already, I have a stack of books on my lap because I have my laptop down down here so I could see, because some of the books I don't actually own. But yeah, and you'll actually see repeat names come up quite a bit. So the first book, I'm actually going to we're going to go through this list chronologically. We're starting with the book that is the oldest. And I'm going to echo what Scott said in that my favorites are very contemporary, but a lot of that is a reflection of my age and when I've gotten more serious about my reading and and so on and so forth. So there are 2 books from 1980. There are no books from 1990. 2 books from see, I'm looking down here. This is not good. 2 books from the early 2000s, and then the rest are from 2012 onward. So yeah, heavily skewed to the last 10 years, but that makes sense because I've done most of my heavy lifting reading in the last 10 years. Okay, starting with 1980, you can all probably see this in my lap. 1980, the book was long listed, short listed. I didn't leave those notes for myself. Oh, wait. I wanted to ask you all at the beginning because I love when you all chime in. But if you have, I'm going to leave the link to the Wikipedia page with all of the Booker long listed and short listed books. It's a great website to peruse. What I'm hoping from you is for you to share a couple of your favorites if you don't feel like typing out 12 or 13 books. A couple of your favorites that have been honored by the Booker over the years. I would love that. I'm always looking for good reads. I would just really appreciate the back and forth because I'm sharing my list and I want to hear from you all. Okay, starting with a book that was honored in 1980, and that is A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. I read this this year. It is a very quiet, thoughtful, poetic novel about a World War I vet trying to figure out his life. And so he spends a month in the country, as the title would presume. But it's so much more than that. It is quiet yet thoughtful. There is a theme of art, a conversation about art being had within these pages. And there is just a sense of sweetness. I would imagine that if this made when this made the list for the Booker, that it was probably quite polarizing, this read, because I could see a lot of people saying that, and actually I think a couple of you have commented saying that it was quite boring, that it just didn't live up to the hype. But I could also see this being a very refreshing book on the list, that it was in a lot of ways straightforwardly pastoral, quiet, meditative, and that would actually be very refreshing for the list. But yeah, this was my first. 1980. In 1986, shortlisted, I believe, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. I'm like trying to center myself. I almost never talk about this on my channel. And there's not a huge reason why. I like this book. I like it. It's like a solid, interesting, well-executed read. And it's also disturbing. Like, she goes to places that I didn't expect. It's a dystopian novel set in the very near future about a young woman who's living this life that is just bound by religious customs now in this dystopian world. And it's really fascinating. It's a really fascinating and interesting novel. In case you didn't know about it, I'm sure everybody knows about this novel. Yeah, this was my first Margaret Atwood book. I've read this and Alias Grace. Alias Grace has actually been honored by the Booker, but I couldn't put it on this list because I have mixed feelings about Alias Grace. But this I have less mixed feelings about. I thought when I was reading it, it was intriguing, it was interesting, and thought-provoking. I think that's the best phrase for it. Very thought-provoking. So yeah, 1986. Moving up to 2004, another book I rarely talk about on my channel. And this is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. This did not win the Booker, but it was, I think, shortlisted. Who knows? I didn't differentiate whether something is shortlisted or longlisted, so I'm very sorry about that. But yeah, 2004. This is, I believe, 5 or 6 interconnected stories that has a very interesting structure. It's a really good novel. It's a really, really interesting novel. I think once you kind of figure out, a lot of people DNF it a little after the halfway point. And if you are one of those people who have read this and DNF'd it, I get it. Because I think a little after the halfway point, or around the halfway point, you can kind of figure out what's going on. And after it was a very uneven reading experience because there were some of the stories that I really, 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 really loved. But I would encourage you to read it through to the very, very end because I thought it all came together very elegantly. However, I don't chagrin those people who, didn't make it past, the 60% mark. But yeah, this, I don't know, it's hard to say. It's this adventurous, mysterious, odd, sci-fi-ish novel. It's weird. It's a weird novel. It's a good novel. I wish that I had more things to say about it than the words that I've said thus far about it. Okay, I'm gonna move on because I don't have much else to say. Maybe this doesn't get a lot of airtime because I haven't I don't know how to talk about it properly. Okay, moving on. Now we're at 2009. It's the first winner on the list. I did note I have 3 winners and they're all like in the next this spot and the next 2 spots. So if I was reading the Booker around this time in real time, I think I would have been like, this prize is so for me. But I didn't. I read these books last year, a couple of years ago. The first one is Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall, which is about Thomas Cromwell, advisor to the king, King Henry VIII in the Tudor court. I love this. I love this novel. This is an incredible novel. Cromwell is an incredible character. of Hilary Mantel's creation. She totally rethinks history and rewrites Cromwell, who I think prior to these novels is more of a scapegoat and a villain. Like, he's often cast as like a devious, villainous mastermind. But in these novels, he's empathetic, thoughtful, quiet. I mean, it's a fantastic novel. I love Thomas Cromwell as a character. So good. And this one in 2009. And then 2012, rightfully, her follow-up novel, Bring Up the Bodies, by Hilary Mantel, about Thomas Cromwell. This is going to be focusing on the Anne Boleyn era of the Tudor court. And it's fantastic. It's the shortest of the three. To me, I think it's the most like pacey and plot driven, really good, really fascinating. Again, and it's kind of incredible. Hilary Mantel develops this incredible voice in which the reader is kind of sitting on the shoulder of Thomas Cromwell, or sort of sitting in his mind in a way, and you're kind of looking out at the world through Cromwell's perspective, and that is how you experience these novels. Fantastic. I mean, so good. So this is one in 2012, and definitely, for sure, absolutely deserves every bit of wonderful praise and accolades that it has received. The following year, in 2013, Eleanor Catton's The Luminaries won. And this is an incredible novel. I always forget when it's set. Okay, it's set in 1866, the New Zealand Gold Rush. It is a mystery, so intricately plotted. Oh, one sec. As I was saying, so intricately plotted. From a plot perspective, this is brilliant. It's so good. It's so well done. And it's essentially a murder mystery, but so much more than that. But at the heart of it, that's what it is. The most elegantly plotted novel I think I've ever read. In 2015, we had the wonderful, the heartbreaking, the incredible A Little Life, as I hit myself in the head with the book. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I read this on my Kindle when I was a brand new mama. And I had 3 weeks off in between graduate school semesters. And in those 3 weeks, I had a baby and I read this novel. And so there I would be, like nursing my baby, and then he would fall asleep, and then I would be in this like quiet, dark room so that he could sleep, not for any other reason. And I would be reading, I would just be absorbing this novel, and it is so brutal, so interesting, and very cinematic in its own right. It's such a good book. So when I saw this cover, which I quite like, Hanya Yanagihara was inspired by this cover, inspired by this photograph, which was done by a relatively famous photographer, and the character of Jude, our main character, pops into her head, and I think she writes the story from there. It is the story of 4 friends that starts out with all of these friends together, and then it starts to focus in on this the central character, Jude, who has had a sordid past, who has had quite the past, to say the least. And really just a fantastic, incredible, amazing, beautiful novel, and not for the faint of heart. The first book that I actually don't have in my collection, but I read last year as actually a part of my Booker reading, and it is Elizabeth Strout's My Name is Lucy Barton, which I actually think is the weakest in her Lucy Barton series, but still really good and interesting in its own right. I would imagine that this book would have been controversial when it made the Booker, I think, long list, I could have just imagined people striking up a controversy about it, because it is in a lot of ways simply written. But I think that her simplicity and the fact that it's not overwrought, not overdrawn, not overwritten, it's not overdone. And in a lot of ways it's a bit cozy but with like gut punches along the way in a strange way. And so anyways, Lucy Barton is a writer. She's older when we meet her, and through this book we get to know more about what she's been through. And she's a writer in New York, and she's from small town America, and what it was like to grow up very poor and wanting to get out, essentially. I don't know, I really like this. I think of Lucy Barton as like one of my friends. Like I could just imagine her and I getting along really well and being thoughtful and sweet. I'm gonna stop talking about Lucy Barton, but I really did enjoy this book. Moving up to 2017, we have Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad, which I did own, but I actually got rid of recently. Which you're like, Shelley, why did Whitehead's novel make it onto your list? If you've gotten rid of the novel. The book is brilliant. It's also a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. And then of course it was honored by the Booker. And it is a magical realist, sort of alternative history-ish take on the Underground Railroad, what is it? Not the train. There is a train in the novel, though. The way that slaves went from house to house in order to find freedom from the South, in which they were enslaved and then trying to get north. Anyways, I'm not going to describe the Underground Railroad to you as I just did, so I'm so sorry about that. But the book reimagines the events and definitely has like this magical element to it. It's a brutal book, though. It is a horror novel, but it's not campy horror. It is like straight, disturbing, to the core horror. And so when I read it, I was really like enthralled and wanted to know what happened, but it also gave me nightmares for a week. The week that I read it was the week that it gave me nightmares. And so, it's hard to keep a book like that around because I know I'm not going to read it again. I do think Colson Whitehead is really good at what he does, and he's an incredibly talented writer. He's just not the writer for me. In 2020, the novel that should have won, it really, really, really should have, and that is The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. The third installment in the Cromwell series. It's like the rise and... this is history, it's not a spoiler, but it's the rise and fall of Cromwell. And in here, it's the fall, and it's a slow plunge. And it's really good. It's really good. The longest of the novels, a feat to say the least. Again, her craft and the development of the language that she uses stays consistent through all three novels. Beautifully rich, really thoughtful, and there are some scenes in here that have 100% stuck out and continue to stick with me through the years, through the year and a half or so since I've read this novel. But it's a great novel. It really should have won in 2020. In 2022, there are two books. I read quite a few novels from the 2022 long list and short list. One of the books that I really loved is a continuation from the I Am Lucy Barton series. It's the third book in the series, Oh William by Elizabeth Strout. Again, we come back to Lucy Barton in her life, and she is ruminating on her ex-husband, and the novel is essentially what she thinks about him and what he meant to her and who she was next to him throughout their marriage, even though at this point, even as she's considering and thinking about him and ruminating on him, they are no longer married. I felt like this book was the most elegant of the four in the series. It's the most surprising, and it has, I think, in a lot of ways, so much compassion in it. Again, Elizabeth Strout has this really wonderful way of writing characters, and particularly Lucy Barton, to be an older protagonist, an older, wiser protagonist that doesn't have everything figured out and doesn't have it all together, and feels very vulnerable in herself as she's talking about sort of the minutia of day-to-day life. it's so good. It's really good. It's really thought-provoking. I enjoyed the whole series. It's like if Elizabeth Strout works for you and you know that, like if you know that her writing works for you, then I would say, you know, read this series. It's good. Like it's a solid series all the way through. And then the final book, 2022, I think it was shortlisted, but it was The Trees by Percival Everett. This tells the story of, basically there's a brutal murder that happens in Money, Mississippi, and the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, the MBI, comes to see what happened and investigate, obviously, what happened. And it's weird. It's weird. It's about racism and I want to say almost like poetic justice to racism. Really fascinating, thought-provoking book. I would say that I had someone comment recently, I think it's Pamela, so hi Pamela. She was saying that she read this and really loved it, but her and I also love, what is it called? Paradise Falls? Scary. Oh, we both really like Twin Peaks. That's what it is. Twin Peaks, the television show. And this has very Twin Peaksy vibes in it. It's just it just does. like Percival Everett, maybe he liked Twin Peaks. So if you are picking up what I'm putting down, perhaps you're not, but it's witty too. Oh yeah, I forgot. The banter in this is sharp. I mean, it is very funny in a lot of ways, and the chapters are incredibly short. It's an incredibly readable book. So good though. So good. I was like, oh, I really ought to reread this. It's a book that makes me happy. And yeah, that is that. So I know this is supposed to be a tag, so I guess I ought to tag people, but I am not going to because I just think that whomever wants to do this video should do it and consider yourself tagged by me. Okay, well that's it for me. So thank you so much for watching. Again, don't forget to share your favorites. These are my favorites from the Booker. I've actually read less Booker books than I initially thought. So there's that for you. But it was really fun to think back on the books that I did love that this prize has honored. And I'm really looking forward to the long list that's coming out in less than a few weeks. All right, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. I really appreciate it.